on behalf of the people I represent in Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan, and doing my best to advance the common good for Canada. We are here in the House of Commons, appropriately named the House of Commons because we are here to represent the common people and advance the common good. This is the history and the mission of this place, and to represent the common people possessed of common sense, that is, the wisdom that is accrued through normal life, and the common good being the good of the common people, and also policies that are for the common benefit of all citizens. I want to observe at the outset of my speech, Madam Speaker, that in the course of the history of democracies, there has often been a tension between the interests and concerns of these common people and those of governing elites. These tensions are actually deeply embedded in the rituals of this very place. When a speaker is first elected, he or she is dragged from their place. The history of this being that early on speakers were reluctant to take their place because there was significant risk of them being beheaded by the monarch. Now there may be other reasons why the speaker is reluctant to take his or her place, but they are different than they were in the past. And this was because the speaker, as the servant of the House, represented the efforts of this chamber of the common people to challenge the monarchy in its efforts to exercise what it saw as its own privileges. In all democracies, and continuing today, and I think particularly in large representative democracies, the existence of some kind of governing elite is always inevitable. If we look back at history, we can see how monarchs, aristocrats, parliamentarians, public servants, public intellectuals, recognized media commentators, corporate managers, identified experts, and on have fulfilled some kind of elite function. Whether they've been praised or criticized, depending on the circumstances, every society has had something like elites. And this is because most people, normal people, have busy lives and by necessity focus on taking care of their families and contributing to the work of the productive economy. A society wouldn't work very well if it wasn't the case that most people were focused on the work of production in an economy and in taking care of their own families and the well-being of their own immediate communities. So while most people focus on their own lives and well-being, the day-to-day operations of governing institutions, even in a democracy, fall to a group of representatives and experts who, paradoxically, whose lives are not representative of the lived experience of most people. This is the reality of the relations that exist in a representative democracy, and to some extent that exist in all societies. There are challenges built into this very reality that will be largely unavoidable in any place and time. But a good society is one in which governing elites understand their function as being to serve the common good. In properly ordered societies, the common sense that is accrued through normal common life, the common sense that is the natural wisdom of the common people, provides the North Star that governing elites pursue. Elites in a democracy should always recognize as the end of their activities the advancement of the common good, noting, of course, that if they fail to advance and serve the common good, representative democracy provides the tools for removing governing elites from their positions. With that in mind, Madam Speaker, I would observe that sadly, over the last 9 years, the relationship that should exist between governing elites and the people has gone way out of balance. This Liberal government, along with their circle of managerial elite insiders and friends, have sought to use their power to advance their own elite interests and to protect their own elite privileges rather than to advance the common good. Liberals have sought to control the various parts of our social and political elite. They have sought to reduce the corporate sector to a high degree of dependence on government. They have sought to bankroll like-minded civil society organizations while punishing civil society organizations with different opinions. They have sought to buy off traditional media through subsidies, undermining its independence. and they have sought to elevate their corporate capitalist cronies in exchange for the willingness of those cronies to use their corporate power to push leftist causes. Liberals have sought to capture the elite and use the elite to advance their own ideological interests and causes, and to do it at the expense of the common people and with no regard for common sense. Liberals have sought to insulate themselves from the realities of life in Canada under their watch. Taxes are up, costs are up, homes are becoming increasingly unaffordable, crime is out of control, and yet liberal elites remain removed from these realities, protected by the walls of their gated communities and protected by their public subsidies from the realities of cost and pain that are resulting for most people from this government's policies. And this is why we feel the urgent need to bring the common sense, the voice of the common people speaking for the common good to this House. Now, Liberals have the audacity to complain when we critique the failures of governing elites. They complain because they don't like it when we give voice to those who have lost trust in their decisions. Paradoxically, they even try to suggest that criticism of insider elites is an attack on democracy. But, Madam Speaker, the ability to critique and replace a governing elite is the very essence of representative democracy. It's what it means to be a representative democracy, that the common people have the capacity to insist through elections that the governing elite is representative and responsive. And the need to remove this particular Liberal government from office is why so many Canadians want a carbon tax election now. Madam Speaker, this breakdown in the relationship between governing elites and the common people, in particular the betrayal of trust by these Liberal elites, is causing the corruption of our government. I want to reflect on the word corruption. It's obviously a sensitive term, but one that I think we must attach to the activities of this NDP Liberal government over the last 9 years. Corruption has two distinct meanings. One way of understanding corruption is as the transgression of some established rule, the breaking of a defined rule of conduct. And this is in practice how we most commonly use the word corruption, to describe instances where there are rules which are supposed to prescribe the conduct of those in power, and those rules are broken for some personal advantage. So that's one meaning or understanding of corruption. Another meaning of corruption, though, and also an important one, is a process of degeneration. When something becomes corrupted, when the rules that are supposed to hold an institution or an entity together themselves no longer uphold any kind of rational purpose. So we can think of corruption as describing both the transgression of established rules and the process of degeneration whereby the actions of those in power, even when they conform formally to established rules, nonetheless are clearly contrary to any rational purpose, and in particular are contrary to the pursuit of the common good. And when I reflect on corruption under this government, I think we should notice that we're talking about corruption actually in both senses of the term. That we have clear cases where rules have been broken, and it starts at the very top with the Prime Minister, and it flows throughout government, and there are various scandals where we can see that particular kind of corruption. But we also see more broadly a tendency within this government to define the objective as being the advancement of their own elite interests and those of their friends. And before I talk about the specifics of the SDTC, I want to highlight one other particular contemporaneous example, and that is the situation around carbon tax conflict of interest, Mark Carney. And it's very interesting to hear the exchanges that have happened about Mark Carney's role in government during question period. Conservatives have critiqued the fact that Liberals have tried to find a way around the rules by making Mark Carney an economic advisor to the Liberal Party without nominally, officially having a role within the kind of executive exercise of power of the Government of Canada. So that is their way of trying to get around the rules which require certain kinds of disclosure, certain kinds of protection from conflict of interest for someone that was actually entering government formally as a public officer holder, as a senior staff member, if he were to become an elected official, a parliamentarian, etc. There would be certain conflict of interest rules that would bind his activity if he was to take on that formal advisory role for the Government of Canada. So Liberals think they've come up with something very clever to kind of skirt around the rules. They say, okay, well, he's not an advisor within the government, he's an advisor to the Liberal Party of Canada. Well, most Canadians are aware of the fact, even if they don't like this fact, but the Liberal Party of Canada is in government. So when you have someone who is a well-connected member of the elite with specific personal economic interests that involve decisions being made by the Government of Canada, who also is able to advise the Prime Minister, Cabinet, senior decision makers through the party, this is clearly an effort to skirt the rules to protect the interests of elite insiders, to allow Mark Carney to continue to get the advantages of his business position while also having close access to government and being able to use that access to advocate for policies which may benefit his private interests without any kind of proper disclosure or transparency. So this may not be corruption in one sense of the word, but I think it demonstrates a corruption in another sense of the word, which is the degeneration of respect for the common good in the exercise of public functions by the government. Now, we are here debating a question of privilege. And the need to raise a question of privilege in itself is a demonstration of a kind of corruption within the relationship between Parliament and elites. That is, questions of privilege have to be raised, not in every case where something inappropriate has happened, but in cases where there are, or Parliament has certain entitlements that it is not able to see fulfilled. So in this case, we're dealing with Parliament having ordered that certain documents be handed over, and the government has refused to hand over those documents. This is not the first time this has happened with the Liberal government. There have been many of these privilege issues raised at various parliamentary committees. I believe this is the second time that a question of privilege specifically relating to the government handing over documents to Parliament has had to come before the House. The last time this happened, the government actually tried to bring the sitting speaker to court over it, and then they called an early election, which had the effect of avoiding that order. Then they made their coalition deal with the NDP, and the NDP covered for them to prevent the further request of those documents. I'm talking about the Winnipeg Lab documents affair. But there have been multiple instances where the government has refused to hand over documents, where officials have refused to appear, or insiders, be they contractors, other officials, have come to committee and refused to answer questions, point blank refused. And this is demonstration of corruption within a governing elite, a lack of respect for basic democratic principles and norms, that government officials, their well-connected insider friends and contractors, feel that they can defy the orders of Parliament and get away with it, as if they're not acquainted with the basic principle that the House of Commons, the representative body of the common people, is supposed to be able to direct the actions of elites. So this is demonstrated. The fact that we've had multiple instances of people called to the bar, likely a third coming up, the fact that we've had so many instances of refusal to hand over documents, it demonstrates this basic problem that our governing elites, increasingly under this Liberal government, feel that they do not have to follow the direction of the common people's house, the elected representatives of the common people, the House of Commons. So this is a corruption of the proper relationship that should exist between governing elites and the common people. That is, the common people's house, the House of Commons, should be recognized as supreme in our system of government, and under these Liberals, it is not. They think that they can defy the direction of the House of Commons. And you'll hear in the debates, Liberals offer various reasons why they didn't like the motion that ordered the production of these documents. And they're welcome to that opinion. They're welcome to vote against motions of the House or motions at committee to order the production of documents. But whether they like the motion is a different question from whether or not they should recognize the supremacy of the House of Commons and the obligation of governing elites to adhere to the wishes of the representatives of the People's House acting in concert. Moreover, Madam Speaker, of course, we need to talk not just about how we got here with this privilege question or the broader issues of corruption in this government, but the outrageous and salacious details of this particular Green Slush Fund scandal. Now, what happened at the Green Slush Fund, very simply, Madam Speaker, is you had a group of elite insiders who were, on behalf of the government, allocating money to various companies. And outrageously, they were voting allocations of government money to their own companies. Now, in some cases, the person who is the direct beneficiary might step out of the room for that vote. In some cases, they didn't. The Auditor General found 58 million went to 10 ineligible projects. 334 million over 186 cases went to projects in which the board members held a conflict of interest. So imagine it. You've got a bunch of people sitting around a table who are deciding which companies get taxpayers' money. And then Bob says, hey, I'd love for my company to get 20 million. Let's all vote on it. But I'll abstain, right? And then next we're going to vote on giving money to Bill's company, right? So, but he'll abstain, right? Sometimes he'll abstain, right? You know, you got a group of people around the table. You can't make this up. You got a group of well-connected elite insiders with a massive pool of taxpayers' dollars, money worked for, earned by everyday Canadians, given to the government in their taxes. And then you've got this group of elite, well-connected insiders appointed by Liberals sitting around deciding how to give out money, in some cases giving it to ineligible projects, in many cases giving it to companies, projects that are directly benefiting those same people sitting around the table. So Madam Speaker, this is outrageous, outrageous. This is a clear demonstration of a basic corruption in the operations of this government. Did it violate established rules? Yes, it violated established rules. But moreover, did the fact that anyone could think that that was acceptable, regardless of what the specific rules said, is it plausible that anyone could actually think that it was acceptable to cast a vote on granting taxpayers' dollars to your own company? It's utterly insane. But I think this is demonstrative of where we have gotten, the kind of corruption that is sinking into the government of Canada over the last 9 years. And whether we're talking about this particular scandal or other scandals that are currently being investigated, the Arrive Scam scandal, where we still have senior public servants blaming each other because a former minister said he wanted someone's head on a plate over it. We're currently investigating the outrageous abuses of the Indigenous contracting program, where non-Indigenous elite insiders were able to take advantage of this program, in some cases by pretending to be Indigenous, taking money that was properly supposed to be benefiting Indigenous peoples. Madam Speaker, we are here in the Common Sense Conservative Caucus to stand up for the common people, to stand up for the common good against Liberal elite insiders who have corrupted our government And this is why we need a new government, Madam Speaker, that will bring in common sense.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government.